All right, we are picking up on the Evolution 2 notes at number 6, Geographic Distribution. And what we have on this screen for you are some different kinds of bears. And so what you want to think about is geographically where these bears would live. So we have the brown bear, the black bear, the brown bear, the speckled bear, that would be from South America. We've got the polar bear, which lives in the Arctic region, and we've got a blonde bear and its two babies who are black bears. Okay, so a couple things to consider on this screen. So first of all is the coloration, so where they live and the fact that they have different colorations to adapt to their environment. For instance, the polar bear is white. It lives in the Arctic region, and it is white because it is in a kind of white Arctic environment, and so it's able to adapt to its environment a little bit better to be camouflaged. We don't see a black bear in an Arctic environment. Okay. Second thing to consider is, genetics. You talked about genetics last year. So, this brown bear, why would it have black bear babies? Okay. It's not necessarily a different kind of bear. It's just that they have different coloration here. So that's something to consider as far as that goes too. So geographic distribution of some fossils is evidence for evolution. And we see down here in this picture, this shows part of Pangaea, and it shows the Glossopteris fossil. And we can see the Glossopteris is on the South American, African, Antarctica, India, and Australia, all those continents. And so this is evidence that Pangaea was a supercontinent and was connected at one time in Earth's history. Because if we look at the Glossopteris on the next screen here, and I'll come back to this one in just a minute, but if we look at this plant, this is a plant that would not live in the Arctic, what we know as the Arctic right now. This is a warmer environment plant. So if we go back to this little map here, that gives scientists evidence that Antarctica was probably closer to the equator because there were things that lived on that continent at one time that were warm environment organisms. Okay. Another idea that you'll talk about again in the number 4 notes is that islands have their own unique types of plants and animals. So when land is isolated like Australia is now, it is an island, the organisms on that island evolve differently than those on the mainland. And we'll talk a little bit more about that in number 4 and a little bit in just 1 minute and on the next slide. All right, so what is speciation? So speciation, you have a couple lines to write in what that is. So I'm just going to repeat that a couple of times for you. So speciation, and it might help to kind of look at this example of the gray wolf as I'm saying the definition. So a speciation is a lineage splitting event. So if we take a look at the gray wolf, its lineage is split into 4 different trees. So basically, when we say lineage, we mean kind of like a family tree, right? So it is a lineage splitting event that produces 2 or more separate species. So when we talk about the gray wolf, there is a lineage split here into actually 4. And then let's take North America, for instance. These 2 dogs are completely different species than the gray wolf. Okay, so again, the definition of that is lineage splitting event that produces 2 or more separate species. So all of these species in this picture have a common ancestor that is the gray wolf, but it has been split along the way and created new and different species due to evolution. All right, another part of speciation has to do with the island I was just talking about in the previous slide. Okay, if we take a look at these fox at the bottom here, they are separated by a waterway. So maybe this is an island, and this fox over here is isolated from the mainland. Okay, this island probably has some ecological conditions that are a little different than the mainland, and so this fox over on the island might evolve a little bit differently than the mainland fox because maybe access to food or something like that. Maybe its coloration changes over time to adapt to its environment, like the bears we talked about. Isolation from other species has to do with speciation because we end up evolving into new species. Okay, same thing with Charles Darwin and the finches. Again, you see some different beaks here, right? And so that is to adapt to their environment and to be able to survive. These over here are insect and nectar eaters, whereas these are fruit and seed eaters. And so in order to survive, their beaks have to be different in order to eat those different, to consume their food. So does evolution still continue today? Yes, it does, and humans have influenced evolution as well. So they play a part. One way is called selective breeding, and you may not know this example right off the top of your head, but I'm going to tell you about this example and one more. And you have some example lines down there in number 7. So your first example you can write in is Belgian blue cows, and the Belgian blue cows are changed. They are bred to be larger, have more muscle mass, have more meat. Now what you want to think of is, why would a farmer breed a cow to have more meat? Well, the farmer's probably going to sell the meat, right? And so the more meat, the more money. So humans do play a large part in selective breeding now. Think about dogs. So that can be your second example, right? You may have or know someone that has a Maltipoo. Well, that's a Maltese and a poodle that have been bred together to make a Maltipoo. So humans have bred 2 different species of dogs to make a new species. And that can be for a lot of reasons because dogs are kind of family pets. So there might be allergy reasons. So maybe somebody is allergic to one kind of dog's hair or something like that. But that is selective breeding when humans get involved and breed different kinds of dogs. All right, peppered moths is another example. And this example is particularly from England during the Industrial Revolution. So we see in this picture, you can hardly see it because it's camouflaged. There's a peppered moth on a tree. Well, before the Industrial Revolution, that worked out perfectly fine, and they were able to camouflage themselves. However, after the Industrial Revolution began, we have soot that's now covering the trees, right? And so that peppered moth is actually standing out quite a bit more. It's not being camouflaged. And so, you know, darker moths end up getting eaten less. All right, they have more, these darker moths now, black moths, end up having more opportunities to make babies, and those babies survive. And so over time, the black moths are going to survive and be able to reproduce better than the peppered moths. And there's a video on your playlist called Natural Selection that talks a little bit more about this peppered moth example. All right, the last example is antibiotic-resistant bacteria. And you might be familiar with MRSA. Okay, so that's what this is a picture of, a skin infection. Okay, and we talked a little bit about antibiotic resistance in the microbiology unit. But this is an example of evolution as well, because bacteria, which cause things like MRSA, for instance, are evolving to be resistant to antibiotics. So antibiotics no longer work to kill the bacteria, which is a huge problem. Okay, that means that the antibiotics that doctors are prescribing don't work to kill the bacteria or to cure the infections. So that is a huge problem, and it's kind of a different example of evolution, but it is still evolution, the changing of organisms, bacteria in particular, over time.